A 70-year-old man lay in his bed in a dark room with the curtains closed, and he hadn't seen the sun in 2 months. His children knocked on the door, but Thomas didn't answer. "Dad, please, open the door." But Thomas just lay there, because 2 months ago the doctor had said, "You have 4 months left." And Thomas was waiting to die. He was getting thinner every day, disappearing a little more each day. His children kept saying, "We need to go to the hospital." But Thomas kept refusing. "Leave me alone." But that day, something happened. A letter dropped into the mailbox. His son picked up the envelope and knocked on the door. "Dad, you got a letter from an old student." Thomas didn't respond. His son slid the envelope under the door. Thomas was lying in bed. He saw the envelope and didn't want to reach for it, but something drew him to it. He reached out, took it, and opened it. And when he read it, everything changed. 2 months earlier, it had been a cold November morning in Pennsylvania. Thomas Anderson, a 70-year-old retired teacher, sat in the doctor's examination room with his hands clasped tightly on his knees. He'd been having back pain for the past few weeks and difficulty urinating. The doctor had run tests, and now the results were in. The doctor looked at the file, then turned to Thomas and after a moment of silence, spoke. "Mr. Anderson, the situation is serious, very serious." Thomas swallowed and waited. "Prostate cancer, and unfortunately, it has spread to your bones," the doctor continued, before pausing. 4 months, maybe a bit more, but not much." Thomas nodded slowly and said, "I understand," before standing up. The doctor talked about medications, pain management, and palliative care. But Thomas wasn't really listening. He thanked the doctor and left the room. As he walked down the corridor, his feet felt heavy, as if he were walking with someone else's feet. He got on the elevator and saw himself in the mirror, a 70-year-old man with gray hair, deep wrinkles, and tired eyes. And now only 4 months. In the parking lot, he got in his car, but didn't start the engine. He just sat there staring into space, thinking about 4 months, about 120 days. He started counting in his head, but then stopped. What difference did it make? 4 months or 4 days? The outcome was the same. He was dying. His phone buzzed in his pocket with a message from his son, David. "Dad, how did the doctor visit go? Did you find anything out?" Thomas looked at the phone. He should write back, should tell him, but he didn't. He put the phone in his pocket, started the car, and drove home. Thomas lived in a small house in a small Pennsylvania town. His wife Linda had died 7 years ago from cancer, and the irony wasn't lost on him. Now he was dying of cancer too. They had 2 children, David and Sarah, both married with children of their own. David lived nearby, Sarah was in New York. Thomas saw them once a week and spent time with his grandchildren. It had been a good life, a quiet life, but now it was over. When he got home, he went straight to the bedroom, didn't even take off his shoes, just lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Evening came and darkness fell, but Thomas didn't get up. The phone rang. It was David, but Thomas didn't look. Sarah called, and Thomas didn't answer. He just lay in bed thinking. Thomas Anderson had been a teacher for 35 years, teaching high school English to thousands of students. Had he been a good teacher? He didn't know. He'd done his best. Taught Shakespeare and Hemingway, signed compositions. But what difference had it made? The students had graduated and moved on with their lives. Did they remember him? Probably not. The next day, David came to the door, calling out, "Dad, why didn't you answer yesterday? We were worried." Thomas didn't get out of bed. David used his key to open the door, came in, and went to the bedroom where Thomas lay. "Dad, what happened? Are you sick?" David asked with concern. Thomas looked at him and said, "I'm tired, just tired." David moved closer and asked, "What did the doctor say?" Thomas turned his head away and claimed, "He didn't say anything. Everything's fine." David didn't believe him and pressed, "Dad, don't lie. What happened?" Thomas took a deep breath and told him, "Cancer. Prostate. It spread. 4 months." David froze. "What?" he managed to say, his voice barely audible. 4 months. Thomas nodded, and David sank onto the edge of the bed. "No," he said. "No, That can't be. Isn't there treatment? Chemotherapy? Surgery? It's too late, Thomas explained. The doctor told me it's too advanced. David began to cry. Dad, but... He started and stopped. Not knowing what to say, Thomas touched his son's hand and tried to comfort him. Don't be sad. I'm old anyway. I'm 70. I've had a good life. David insisted they should tell Sarah, and Thomas agreed. David called her, and Sarah came the next day. The two siblings sat with their father, talking and making plans. Sarah suggested, let's see another doctor, get a second opinion. But Thomas refused, saying, it won't make a difference. I know what's happening. His children wanted to stay, but Thomas told them to go, saying, you have jobs, you have children. I'm fine. Come by sometimes. David and Sarah didn't want to leave, but Thomas insisted, so they left, and Thomas was alone. The first day Thomas got up, made coffee, and looked out the window. It was November. Leaves were falling. The sky was gray. Everything was dying, just like him. That evening, he lay back down in bed. The next day, he got up, but for less time. The third day, he barely got up at all. By the fourth day, he stayed in bed completely. David called every day asking Dad, how are you? And Thomas would reply, I'm fine, though his voice was weak. Are you eating? David would ask, and Thomas would claim, yes, though he wasn't eating, only drinking water sometimes. David said he was coming over. Thomas said it wasn't necessary, but David came anyway. When he opened the door, he was shocked. The house was dark, dirty dishes had piled up in the sink, and there was a foul smell. He went to the bedroom where Thomas lay with the curtains closed. Dad, David exclaimed, what's happening to you? You haven't gotten out of bed for a week. Thomas wouldn't look at him and just said, I'm tired. David opened the curtains and light streamed in, but Thomas squinted and turned his head away, saying, close them. I don't want them open. David tried to reason with him, saying, Dad, this can't continue. You need to eat, shower, get up. Thomas asked, why? Why should I get up? I'm dying anyway. David didn't know what to say and replied, Dad, you're not dead yet. You have 4 months. You should live. Thomas asked, live for 4 months or wait for 4 months. What's the difference? The outcome is the same. David started to protest, but Thomas cut him off, saying, go, David. Leave me alone. David didn't want to leave, but Thomas insisted. As David left the house, he was crying and called Sarah immediately. Sarah, Dad's in bad shape. He won't get out of bed, won't eat, just lies there. Sarah came right away. The two siblings went to their father's house and talked to him, pleaded with him. They told him, Dad, you can't be like this. You have to live for us, for your grandchildren. But Thomas said he didn't want to see them or anyone else. Sarah observed that he was depressed and suggested they see a doctor and get medication, but Thomas refused, saying he just wanted to lie there. His children didn't know what to do and called a psychiatrist. The doctor came, spoke with Thomas, and explained, Mr. Anderson, you're experiencing depression, which is normal, but it's treatable. Thomas said he didn't want treatment, that he just wanted to wait. The doctor wrote a prescription, but Thomas didn't take the medication. Weeks passed, and Thomas continued to stay in bed. David came every day bringing food, but Thomas wouldn't eat. He was losing weight and getting weaker. His beard had grown out. His hair was disheveled. His eyes were empty. One day Sarah asked, Dad, do you remember Mom? Even when she was sick, she didn't give up. She fought until the end. You should fight too, Thomas asked quietly. Did your mother's fighting change anything? She still died. I'm going to die too. Why should I fight? 2 months passed, and Thomas was now very thin, terribly thin. His skin was pale and his eyes had sunken in. The doctor had said 4 months, but Thomas seemed to be trying to die sooner. His children insisted they needed to go to the hospital, but Thomas refused, saying, I'm staying here. I'll die here. That day, at the end of the 2nd month, David came to the house again and found an envelope in the mailbox, an old envelope with handwriting. Mr. Thomas Anderson, Pennsylvania. David picked up the envelope and looked at it. There was no return address, but there was a note. From your former student. David went upstairs and knocked on the door, calling out, "Dad, you got a letter from an old student." Thomas didn't respond. David pleaded, "Dad, please, read this." Still no response. David slid the envelope under the door and left. Thomas lay in bed with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. He saw the envelope but at first didn't care. What difference would it make? An old student had probably written, "Get well soon, teacher." Thomas didn't care, but hours passed, and the envelope stayed there. Thomas looked at it, a white envelope with handwriting. He didn't want to reach for it, but something drew him to it, though he didn't know what. Slowly, he reached out, took the envelope and opened it. Inside were 3 pages written by hand. Thomas put on his glasses and began to read. "Dear Mr. Anderson, you may not remember me. My name is Michael Brooks. I was your student in 1998-1999 when I was a senior in high school and you were my English teacher. A few days ago, I saw you in the town newspaper at a friend's funeral. You looked older, but I recognized you immediately. Back then, you were a young teacher. Now you've aged, but your face is the same. I've wanted to write to you for a long time, more than 20 years, but I couldn't find the courage. I'm writing now because I need to do this before it's too late. There's something I need to tell you. 20 years ago, in the spring of 1999, I was 17 years old, and I was planning to kill myself. Nobody knew. My family didn't know. My friends didn't know. But I had decided. Life was too hard, too heavy. I was depressed, lonely. Everything felt meaningless. I had made a plan. At the end of May, after school ended, I was going to do it. But one day in early May, I'm sitting in your class. We're reading Hamlet, discussing the to be or not to be scene. You ask us, why does Hamlet choose to live? The class is silent. Nobody answers. I'm silent too. Then you speak. Hamlet chooses to live because he's curious. He doesn't know what will happen after death. Maybe it will be worse, but in life, no matter how bad it is, there's still a possibility that things can change, a possibility of healing, a possibility of hope. Then you look at us and say, life is hard, sometimes very hard. But life is the only chance we have, the only opportunity. Giving up is easy, but to continue, to fight, to keep living, that's real courage. That day when I left class, something had changed inside me. I canceled my plan. I decided to live, to give myself one more chance. And you know what? That decision saved my life. Now I'm 37 years old. I'm married with 2 children. I'm a teacher, just like you. I have a good life, but if it hadn't been for those words you spoke that day, I wouldn't be here. I never told you. I was ashamed, afraid, but I'm telling you now, you saved my life. Those words saved me. And now I'm a teacher too. Every day when I walk into my classroom, I remember your words and think, maybe one of my students is struggling too. Maybe one word, one action of mine could change someone's life. You did that for me, and that's why I wanted to thank you. Even if it's late, I hope you're still healthy and happy. I want you to know that you made a difference. In my life, and probably in the lives of others too. You taught me how to live. Thank you forever. Michael Brooks. When Thomas finished reading the letter, his hands were trembling. He read it again, then once more, his eyes filled with tears. Michael Brooks. He tried to remember. 1999, 20 years ago. He'd had so many students. Michael Brooks. Had he been a quiet kid? Did he sit in the back? He couldn't quite remember. But he did remember that lesson. Hamlet. To be or not to be. Yes, he'd given that talk, but he'd forgotten about it. Just a lesson. Just to talk. He hadn't thought it was important, but for Michael, it had been important. For Michael, it had been life-saving. Thomas pressed the letter to his chest and cried. For the first time in 2 months, he cried. Because for 2 months, he hadn't felt anything. But now he felt something. Slowly, he got out of bed. His legs were weak and trembling, but he stood up. He opened the curtain, and sunlight streamed in. He blinked. How long had it been since he'd seen the sun? 2 months. 2 months in darkness. He looked in the mirror and the sight shocked him. Thin, pale, with an overgrown beard and disheveled hair, almost unrecognizable. But there was something in his eyes. A light, a small light. He went to the bathroom and washed his face. Cold water hit his face, and he felt awake. He looked in the mirror again and whispered, "Michael Brooks, I saved your life." That day, Thomas showered for the first time in 2 months. He shaved his beard, combed his hair, put on clean clothes, went to the kitchen, and washed the dishes. He wanted to eat something, but his stomach was empty, so he ate some bread and drank water. Then he sat down and thought. Michael Brooks remembered him after 20 years and said he'd saved his life. How many students had Thomas taught? Thousands. Maybe there were others. Maybe he'd affected other lives too. He picked up the phone and called David, who was surprised. "Dad, you're calling me?" Thomas confirmed. "Yes, come here. I want to show you something." David said he'd come right away. When David arrived, he was shocked. His father was standing, clean, dressed. "Dad," he exclaimed. "You're up." Thomas smiled and said, "Yes, I'm up." When David asked what had happened, Thomas handed him the letter and told him to read it. David read the letter, and by the time he finished, he was crying. "Dad," he said, "this is incredible." Thomas nodded and explained, "I lay in bed for 2 months waiting to die, but this letter reminded me of something. I still have a reason. I still have meaning." David hugged his father and reminded him, "Yes, Dad, you do. You're here for us too, for your grandchildren." Thomas acknowledged, "I know. I understand now." From that day on, Thomas changed. He started getting up, started eating, regaining his strength. David and Sarah came every day and brought his grandchildren. Thomas played with them and read books to them. One day, Thomas told David, "I want to do something." When David asked what, Thomas explained, "I want to find my old students, talk to them. Maybe there are others like Michael. I want to know, to understand." David asked how he would find them, and Thomas suggested social media, Facebook. "You taught me how." David smiled and agreed to help. Together they set up a Facebook account for Thomas Anderson, posted an old profile photo, and wrote, "Pennsylvania High School English teacher, retired." Then they started searching for old students. Names were hard to remember, but they found yearbook photos and looked up the names. Gradually, students found Thomas and sent friend requests and messages. "Teacher, I remember you. Mr. Anderson, how are you?" Thomas responded to each one, and they talked and reminisced. One student wrote, "Teacher, your Shakespeare class changed my life. Now I'm a literature professor." Another said, "You taught me how to write. Now I'm a journalist." Someone else wrote, "You taught me to believe in myself." Thomas read message after message, and each one surprised him. He had made a difference, really made a difference. Not just Michael, but others too. Dozens of students, maybe hundreds. They all remembered him and said he'd taught them something. One day, Thomas found Michael Brooks on Facebook and sent him a message. "Michael, this is Mr. Anderson. I received your letter. Thank you. It changed my life." Michael immediately replied, "Teacher, this is incredible. You got my letter?" Thomas wrote back, "Yes, I did, and I remember you now. You were a quiet student who sat in the back row." Michael confirmed, "Yes, that's right. I always stayed quiet, but I listened to you, every word." They messaged for hours, then talked on the phone. Michael asked if they could meet, and Thomas enthusiastically agreed. Michael said he wasn't in Pennsylvania, but would come visit. 2 weeks later, Michael came. When Thomas opened the door, he saw a 37-year-old man, medium height, brown hair, smiling. "Teacher," Michael said. Thomas smiled back and said, "Michael." They hugged. They went inside, made coffee, sat down, and talked. Michael spoke about his family, his work, his life, saying, "It's all because of you. That day, that lesson, those words, they saved me." Thomas tried to downplay it, saying, "I was just doing my job. I was a teacher. I taught." But Michael insisted, "No, you were a teacher, but you were also a lifesaver. You may not have realized it, but you..." Thomas's eyes filled with tears as he explained, 2 months ago, the doctor told me I had 4 months. I went home and lay down in bed, waiting to die, because I thought my life had no meaning. that I hadn't made any difference. But your letter showed me the truth. I did make a difference. In your life and in others' lives. Michael confirmed this, saying, "Yes, teacher, you did. And now I have students too. I teach them what you taught me, how to live, how to hope, how to keep going." When Michael left that day, Thomas thanked him for teaching him how to live again. But Michael replied, "No, teacher, you taught me, I just reminded you." Months passed, and Thomas stayed alive. 4 months passed, then 5, then 6. The doctor was surprised and asked, "Mr. Anderson, how are you feeling?" Thomas replied, "I feel good. For the first time in months, I feel good." The doctor ran tests and announced, "Your condition is stable, no progression. This is rare." Thomas didn't try to understand it. He just lived. Every day he got up, talked to his students, and spent time with his grandchildren. One day, the local newspaper called asking if they could do an interview about his story with Michael Brooks. Thomas agreed, and the newspaper published an article, "Retired Teacher Saved a Life." Learned about it 20 years later. The article went viral. Other newspapers wrote about it, and TV stations called. Thomas gave interview, and something happened. More students came forward. Messages arrived saying, "Mr. Anderson, I was your student too. You helped me." Dozens of messages. Hundreds of messages. Thomas read them all and responded to each one. A year later, Thomas was still alive. The doctor admitted, "I can't explain it. I said 4 months, but you're still here." Thomas smiled, but said nothing more. One day, the local school invited Thomas to speak to students. He accepted and went to the school, where hundreds of students filled the auditorium. Thomas went to the microphone. "Hello," he began. "I'm Mr. Anderson. I'm a retired teacher, and I want to tell you a story." And he told them about Michael, about the letter, about the dark 2 months, and about how he was saved. "Sometimes life is very hard," he told the students. "Sometimes we want to give up, but I want you to know something. You matter. Each and every one of you. And maybe you can't see it now, but you're going to make a difference. You're going to change someone's life, maybe with a word, maybe with an action, maybe just by being there." I taught for 35 years and had thousands of students, but I never knew, never realized, until I was 70 years old, waiting to die. Then a letter came, and I learned I had made a difference. I mattered. I still had meaning. You matter too, all of you. Don't forget that. The students gave him a standing ovation, and Thomas cried. For the first time in his 35-year teaching career, students were giving him a standing ovation. That day, as he drove home, Thomas looked out the window. Winter was over, and spring had come. Trees were turning green. Flowers were blooming. The sun was shining. Thomas smiled. He was still here. He was still living. If Thomas's story gave you hope, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Every week, we share inspiring stories like this. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any. Write to us in the comments. Has someone changed your life?